Week 9 of the NFL season will have a record-setting matchup between the Colts and Patriots. Should see a lot of big numbers from wide receivers in that game alone, but there were plenty of those in Week 8 as well. Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horwitz with you on the Professional Grade Players, presented by GMC. It's the best games broken down into 3 categories. Players you expected to do well and did, those that you hoped would be successful based on matchups, and then guys that came out of nowhere. And yes, the Pats and Colts had good fantasy weeks, but they'll get plenty of attention this week, so we'll go somewhere else. And before the receivers, let's begin with a pair of running backs you expected to have big weeks. Willie Parker against the Bengals and Brandon Jacobs overseas against the Dolphins. Both those defenses in the bottom 5 in rush D, and Parker had a solid fantasy day with 126 and a touchdown, while Jacobs, in a game with very little offense, had 131. He's averaged 15 fantasy points the last 2 weeks in regular scoring leagues. Let's get to the receivers, and this is one you should have expected to have a huge game. Braylon Edwards, coming into St. Louis, had 4 touchdowns his previous 3 games and just added to it with a pair against the Rams to go with 117 receiving yards. Aside from Randy Moss, Braylon Edwards leads all receivers in fantasy points in leagues that you don't get points for catches. How about a wideout you hoped would do well? And in this case, it's not because of the matchup, but you weren't sure what to get from him because of his quarterback. Lee Evans was up against a dismal Jets D, but a rookie QB, which turned into J.P. Lossman. He had the 4th-year pro, 138 yards, 5 catches, and a touchdown, a top 5 performance in Week 8. And Marcus Colston, not a guy that comes out of nowhere after the season he had last year, but this season he had recorded just 1 week in which he had more than 6 fantasy points on CBSSports.com. That quadrupled on Sunday, out of nowhere, to catch 8 balls for 85 yards and 3 of Drew Brees' 4 touchdowns. That's 1 more than he had in the first 6 games, talking about Colston. Folks, that'll do it for the post-Week 8 edition of the Professional Grade Players, presented by GMC. But for all your fantasy information, including the best matchups for Week 9, be sure to read Jamie Eisenberg and Dave Richard only here on CBSSports.com. I'm Jason Horwitz. Take care.